Hello and welcome to Just Keep Writing,
a podcast for writers
by writers
to keep you writing.
I'm Marshall.
I'm Nick.
I'm Brent.
I'm LP.
And I'm Will.
And with us again this week is the awesome Piper J. Drake, back again, but this time we get to talk about her amazing new book, Wings, Once Cursed and Bound. Welcome back to the show, Piper.
Thank you. And I'm so excited.
We're excited as well. Congratulations. We're stoked. Let's just get to it. Will?
Okay. I know that there are questions. I'm like holding a stuffed animal in comfort here because they're going to be hard. You're going to make me think, aren't you?
I'll be honest with you. The first question may sound like a surprise, but it shouldn't be. Okay, go.
I'd like you to describe in 3 words that can be completely unrelated of writing this book.
Oh, I should have seen this coming.
Yep. Everybody should see it coming, but for some reason nobody does. It's hilarious. I love it.
No, I'm like dodge. No, 3 words. Childhood. Diaspora. And I don't know, we got a 3rd word for this book.
What comes to your mind? What comes to mind when you think of it?
The writing of the book.
The writing of the book. The writing process of the book
itself.
Anything.
Yeah. We got childhood.
Diaspora.
Yeah, what else?
And flying.
You got this, Piper. And crying?
Flying.
Yes. Okay. All right. So let's unpack them. Let's talk about childhood.
Why childhood? All right. So a lot of the inspirations for the main character, Pirapan, and being a Kinari is because as a kid, my mom used to tell me Thai folk tales all the time. And also I studied a little bit of Thai traditional dance, not formally, but here and there, because I was a dancer, traditionally Western trained. So from age 3 to age 28, I used to dance with a dance company. Like I used to go to classes, and then when I got old enough, I danced with the dance company in ballet, like Western ballet, jazz, hip hop, lyrical. Right. So had a lot of dance training. And so, of course, I was interested in Thai traditional dance here and there when the opportunity arose to learn about it. Not formally, but, putting on exhibitions for Thai dance in college and things like that. And the fun thing about a lot of Thai folklore is that it is also portrayed in Lochon, like Thai traditional dance. And so one of my favorite mythologies or folk tales was Menorah, which is about a Thai bird princess. And, the mythological beings called Kinari, right? Menorah herself's a Thai bird princess. And there's several different dances from her epic story that I learned to do. And so that was one of the first things that I thought about when I was like, okay, when I think about this main character and what she is, I think about those childhood memories, right? And a couple of like random things like Piper Mommy watching me practice in a Thai traditional dance costume as a Kinari. And even though the wings are from the hip on the actual Kinari in the Thai traditional dance costume, they are attached to the arms. And I'd be like trying to be all graceful doing the dance. Mom's like, you don't look like a Thai bird princess. You look like a hovering turkey. So some of that childhood memory stuff came back, which leads me into the 2nd word, which is diaspora. And a lot of that has to do with the way that I was trained to dance in Western style and then trying to convert or pull into being able to do Thai traditional dance, which has a different step. It has a different posture about it. Not in any way curved down or anything, but like the where your balance is and how far apart you position your feet, the kinds of costume you're wearing, the way that you would tilt your head just so, or the way you would hold your arms, things like that are all different in Thai traditional dance than it would be for, let's say, like Western ballet. And especially the way that the tension and the positioning goes all the way down the arm into the fingertips was something. But also my mom would be like whacking my bum because of like how my tailbone turned, or like the way my hips turned out or didn't turn out. And the way that, like, again, the whole how far apart your stance is to ground yourself in balance when you're standing, right? Like, so being diaspora and growing up in the US, everything about how I moved through the world was pants oriented. And a lot of the Thai traditional dance costumes are in very long, ankle length, close fitting, close wrapped skirts. Except if you check history, they would do the wraps where they would bring it up through the legs so that you could move. But again, it wasn't so that you could be like, pants, I'm going to stand with a broad stance and my legs out and I'm going to be running 2 steps at a time anywhere. Right? No, you're still pretty close together. Likewise, when it comes to that traditional costuming. And the other thing about it was like, when I would put on the Thai traditional dance costume, that stuff's only tied on. There's no zippers anywhere. And it's like a piece of fabric wrapped around your waist, and there's a piece of fabric that goes around the top. And anyone who knows me in person physically knows I'm a 3D girl with some curvature. So when I would perform, we would tie me into the costumes the traditional way, and then my mom would like back it up with sewing with like the kind of cotton twill twine that you would use to tie up a roast, like that thick, like holding things on. So again, like that whole diaspora thing of like trying to figure out who this person is, and she is a dancer, and how much she knows about who she is, and thinking, okay, so she struggled a lot with that culture. She struggled a lot with who she is just human wise, right? But what happens if none of your family knows anything about being Kinari because it's been generations and everybody thought they didn't exist? So you just find yourself trying to teach yourself about who you are, and all you got is like one legend and a couple of traditional dances. That's all you got to figure out who and what you are. So that's why a lot of bouncing back and forth between like childhood memories and diaspora, and not even the memories of being told the actual story, just the memories of trying to move.
Yeah. And what about flying?
Okay, so again with that turkey story, apparently
Yeah.
I don't dance like a flying bird princess. I hover like a turkey. So I
Oh,
tried to
Mommy
slip that
Piper.
joke into the book and it didn't make it.
So my next question is going to be tough. I want to like throw that out there, Piper. Because, I've read a lot of your work. And I feel like, and I said this in the other episodes, that this feels like the most Piper story. Like, I feel like this is like the closest book that I've read of yours. And I think I've read almost all of your books, except for maybe 2, that you've written. And I want to ask you this question. God, do you want to say something before I ask?
No, just hit me.
In the last episode, you talked about balancing structure with readers' expectations that you have. And it really made me think of, do you feel like you have to placate white Middle Western readers to get that balance? And maybe why you haven't leaned into like your culture even more so? Or do you feel like that was more of a publishing thing? Because when I read this book, I was like, God, I feel like this is like your essence more than anything I've read. Or is it that, you're just getting better as a writer and you're getting more comfortable and you're like, okay, now I'm ready to tell this story?
So I don't know if it's either one or the other perspective that you've
Mm-hmm.
proposed out there. I think that, first of all, LP and I talked a lot in previous episodes about, the choices and the strategies that a person as a writer may or may not make to either appeal to a more mainstream, broader audience, or to niche in to a specific audience that is looking for, you know, specifically this flavor of writing. And I think that there's a place for both, right? I don't think I've ever thought of it as placating the cishet white crowd ever, or the Midwest audience or readership. It's never about placating, because that's an exercise in futility, right? If they're not going to be satisfied, or they're not going to like the taste, they're definitely not going to ever be satisfied. They're never going to like the taste. So I'm not spreading my legs for them, right? Like, so, I went there. My bad. So instead, I think it's more along the lines of different books having ranges of experience, and how vulnerable I got while I was giving that range of experience to my characters. Right? Like, so some of my early books, I got real vulnerable in Hunting Cat, which is one of my earliest sci-fi romances. And so you got a lot of vulnerable emotion, and it got kind of whitewashed out in editing, but Caitlin is Asian diaspora. I just don't go into it deeply because this is space exploration, right? Like, who knows what genetic stock she comes from Terra? She just was intended to be Asian diaspora, like, but like generations out in space kind of situation. So, you know, the emotions and stuff didn't necessarily have to do with cultural identity. I didn't put a lot of that in there, but I did make myself vulnerable from an emotional standpoint with Caitlin. And I think that came through really, really beautifully in Hunting Cat. But later, when I switched over to romantic suspense, I think where you see my vulnerability and where it shines the most in the characters is in the dogs, right? And rather than the humans, because like there's so much of my heart in the dogs, and what I remember of my Kaiser and my Mozart, my dogs that were working dogs that I rescued and lived out the rest of their twilight years with me, came through in the way that I wrote the dogs in the True Heroes series. So the humans, maybe I didn't take the time to make myself as vulnerable when I was writing them and exploring their emotions and their identities, right? And then you move on into the Mythwoven series, and the fact that I was really, really exploring some stuff that I hadn't poked at before with Pirapun, right? With my childhood and some of those feelings, that the vulnerability that I allowed to come through my character there is something new that you're experiencing with my writing. And yeah, I do also think that it is partially me becoming better as a writer. And I also think that it cannot be ignored that I also was with an editor who got my book better than any other editor I've ever worked with. And so things don't get pulled out. I don't have to fight or stet or spend a lot of frustrating time compromising. So that can't be ignored either, is the fact that I was working with an editor who got my book and got the concept of my book, and also shared a lot of understanding with me about where I come from when it comes to, like, you know, she herself doesn't share a racial identity with me, but she also is queer. She's also, I think that's okay to say. And she's also like a gamer like I am. She plays TTRPG like me. So she understood a lot of my love for like Shadowrun and World of Darkness, and a lot of these worlds that are kind of urban fantasy or post-apocalyptic urban fantasy, that have that edgy feel to them. And then she also knows how much I love a lot of urban fantasy books and writers like Ilona Andrews and like Patricia Briggs, and like Laurel K. Hamilton. Right. So she got a lot of that, and she got where a lot of things of those elements and nods came from in the book. So I think that you find that there's also that harmony between the author and the editor that you're finding in the book as well. Because I, as an author, didn't have to fight with my editor.
Okay. So then I know Nick has questions about like the pitch, because we still haven't given anyone the pitch or like what it's about, but I need to ask this question before I forget. With that being said, you know, do you feel like you're ready to lean in even more after writing this book? Like, and I ask you this because, again, I've read a lot of your work, and I totally see, like, you know, you have different, in every book, we all have different parts of ourselves. But I really think that there is something magical in this book when it comes to you. And I don't know if it's because I know you a little bit, you know, like outside of like your work. Like I'm not just someone who's just read your work, but because, you know, like we've talked about things and our experiences. After writing this book, did it make you feel more emboldened to like lean in and dig deeper?
That's a good question, because not every character intended for the books in Mythwoven are always going to be Thai American or Thai diaspora, right? And also, my intent for Mythwoven isn't necessarily for each book to follow Pirapan and Bennett. You know, we're going to follow a little bit more of the tendency that you see more often in paranormal romance, where each book is going to zero in on a different set of characters from the Dark Consortium. And those characters aren't all Thai diaspora, right? I can give you it if you read or you have read Wings Once Cursed and Bound, you can probably make a pretty good educated guess as to who is going to be central in book 2, which is already turned into my editor, by the way. So the bare bones of it is there, and it's got to go through a massive revision, because that's my process, right? Like she reads it and it always goes through a massive revision where I add like 20,000 words. So, you know, don't bother to steal that particular version of the manuscript. But like where I would lean in is more about probably who my characters are. I think I would lean more into rather than what they choose or what they do. I probably won't dodge into, you know, putting my heart and soul into lovable pets as much as I did in the True Hero series. Cause I was just like, one of the things you could like really read from the True Hero series is I was holding on to the fact that a dog will never lie to you. I was real tired of humans at the time, and a dog will never lie to you, right? Like that was like the whole thing with True Heroes. Yeah, we got second chances and everything, but the dogs know. The dogs will never lie to you, and they always know who's a good person, right? Like that's the whole series. But with Mythwoven, it's a lot more about exploring who you are, who you decide to be, and also who you're trying to figure out, what you're trying to figure out about yourself with the knowledge that's at hand. Not everybody has a mentor, right? Not everybody has lore. Not everybody has generational knowledge. So I think I'm going to be exploring that more and more throughout the books, as well as like digging up mythology and like, hey, like what do we get wrong over time? Like most of the folklore across regions was passed on by word of mouth. So really, how accurate is it? So, and it's going to change from region to region. So I think I'm going to explore a lot about how myth can be a lot different from what was written. So I think I will open up that way.
Great. Okay, go ahead, LP.
It's so interesting that you talk about how like myth is passed down to oral tradition, and then you say, how accurate is it going to be? I'm interested because I think that like there is a codified version of mythology that we have accepted in the West. Like this is what Norse mythology is, and this is what Greek mythology is, and this is what Roman mythology is. But then there are like other mythologies that didn't get the written down treatment that these three that we know very well, like, you know, Celtic or Baltic or interior of Africa, which is 52 countries, and all of them have different traditions. And so I'm always interested in like, and as a person from diaspora, because this is going to sound like an accusation if I don't say this first. I'm always concerned about what it's okay for me to talk about or like extrapolate on, because I personally am a person from diaspora and like don't have like boots on the ground experience with like firsthand oral tradition of X, Y, and Z. But I also recognize that like, you know, if someone was closer to it, i.e. Piper to Thai mythology, I might impart someone closer, i.e. Piper, with more grace because they're closer to it to maybe interpret. So I'm curious, like, what was when you said accuracy that triggered me, right? So I'm like, so what responsibility did you feel to accuracy, and how much and why? And if you felt too much, I want you to be okay.
Oh,
Right.
you see this witch's streak of gray hair that has started to show up on this one side of my part? There was a little bit of stressing here when it came to touching on a myth that I loved so much, because the way that it was told to me was orally, right? Like my mother told me these stories when I was a kid. And when you ask any of her relations, like, any of my aunts, uncles, my grandparents back when they were alive, because I was a kid who would be like, I would like a book on mythology, right? Like I've got a book on Roman mythology. I've got a book on Greek mythology. I would like one on Thai mythology. Like every summer I would ask, and like just even trying to translate that so people understood what I was asking for was a beast. And so finding them was really hard. And finally we found one about Thai folk tales, but it was written by a South Asian with an English translator. Now, South Asian and Thai mythology, due to history, have a lot of really, really strong roots and background connected and origins, because of history. But we won't get into that as much right now, right? Like that's a discussion for another time. But the versions that I heard were how they had become and evolved in Thailand. And it was being told by a South Asian. And so that was like, oh, is there an English translation? Is there even a younger reading level Thai version of these written by a Thai person? And none of my family could find me a book. And I was like, when I even came back and I did a summer semester in Thailand at a Thai university. And I was asking, do we have a historian at this university? And they're like, no, this university doesn't do that. I'm sure it was a university at the time, but my family was like, we don't have the time to go find you a professor. You've got what's available here. And I was like, and I was thankful for that because it was still a really great university, just didn't happen to have a specialist in Thai mythology. So what I knew was that I had the mythology and the stories that my mother told me and I remembered. And I have a very good memory, right? And she would tell them over and over again. I had the reinforcement of walking around Wat Prakao, the ancient palace, and the murals there, which is about the Ramakien, which is a different epic tale. But at certain points there on the murals, Kinari are in the background, right? And then I also had the dances. And then I had these other, and literally as I was doing research now here in the 2020s, I did find another reference that I had mentioned in a previous episode. But again, the main authors were not Thai, but they were involved at least in the translation and interpretation this time. So I was like, okay, I'm doing the research here, and you're going to get a piece of fiction that is based on what I remember from those firsthand retellings. And that's where I'm going to go with that. And somebody's going to tell me that I got it wrong. And I'm going to say, this is what I know. And this is how it's based on. And her identity was one where, yeah, I felt the heavy lifting on that. And I mean, I'm already aware that there are some people who said, you didn't teach me enough about this myth. You didn't teach me enough about Kinari. All I know about Kinari is that they got wings on their hips. That's all I know. And I was like, well, that's what you took from the book. Okay. I'm not going to apologize, but I'm also not going to be able to respond because the book's out there. I'm not going to be able to add more. Are we going to learn more about Pirapan? Yes, in the fact that there are bonus content short stories out there, both in the Bookish Box Looks edition, as well as will come out in Patreon, and there will be cameos of Pirapan and Bennett throughout the future books, where she's continuing to learn about herself, and Bennett and Pirapan are also learning about each other and continuing to do so as the other Dark Consortium characters are central to the story. So I plan to get into that. But yeah, there was some heavy lifting, and I'm also real nervous because the whole point behind Mythwoven is that there's going to be a lot of other folktale and mythology from other places. Mm-hmm. And I'm not as close to that. I'm not as much of an authority in that as I am with Thai mythology. So I feel that too.
Okay, so because we're like 28 minutes into the podcast and we haven't even given the pitch. So give the pitch for the book.
I mean, what I pitched it. Do you want the pitch that I gave to my editor first?
Yeah. Bring it, sister.
So I was like, okay, it's kind of a Warehouse 13 meets the Librarians, only time mythology inspired. And they're not crazy enough to keep all of the items in one spot. Because that always seemed kind of odd to me. Like, why would you gather all of these dangerous things in one spot? Like, why?
That's a good point. Yeah.
I literally had a TTRPG back just after college, in the new adult days after college, when we were kind of trying to be adults, but like we were lucky if we put our pants on, which, I have not advanced that far since then. But, we had a World of Darkness campaign, which was, I think it was called the Beast of Asharu. And the point behind it was all of the people in that World of Darkness group, and was like a cross thing. It wasn't just Vampire the Masquerade or Werewolf. We had like representatives from each of the things from World of Darkness. And we were running around grabbing pieces or acquiring pieces of this cursed Beast of Asharu to reassemble it, to quote unquote bind it, to keep someone else from reassembling it. But we reassembled this beast. Why did we think that it was better to have this all together? Like, this isn't Dragon Ball where you get a wish out of it, right? Like, we thought it was better to bring them all together, to keep it bound all together instead of keeping it all separate apart across the globe. So that was always something I was thinking about during that campaign. Like, why are we bringing them all together? It seems like a bad idea. So I wanted to create this thing where we're going after these objects of myth and magic. And who are the characters that are going after these objects of myth and magic? What if they're forgotten beings as well? And what if they're real? And so we ended up with this urban fantasy situation where people are literally just going after objects of myth and magic, and they themselves are beings, supernatural beings. So that was the pitch that I gave to my editor, and she was like, okay. And the only thing she asked was, are you trying to go post-apocalyptic like Shadowrun style, or are you trying to pull this more World of Darkness present day with fantastical elements? And I'm like, World of Darkness. And she's like, I'm sold. And my agent was like, I'm lost. And we're like, it's okay. We've got this.
I want to go back real quick. Nick wants to kill me because he has questions, but I just want to ask this one question.
You said one.
I want to go back to about like when I said that feels like more you, and like I feel like you like leveled up. So and then as we were talking tonight, what questions were you asking yourself when you were writing this book and then planning the series? Because maybe this is what I'm feeling from it. I feel like you're asking these really important questions that are like maybe hitting home in some way.
So I think one of the aspects of this was that I wasn't asking myself, how do I keep these two together? It was more, as I was writing, who are each of these people? And what are they what challenges do they face? Right? And as a third question, how will they end up together at the end? So it was a different approach, right? Instead of thinking about this, because I wasn't writing a romance. So this wasn't where the romance arc is the central plot line. For me, it was, hey, yes, this is still this still is along the lines of a paranormal romance. This is still kind of a paranormal romance for some people. Like if that's what they want to take away from it. But it's also an urban fantasy in the fact that there's a problem to resolve. And who are each of these people, and how are they overcoming both this problem to solve as well as overcoming their own baggage that they carry as they all come to meet each other? So that was, I think, the difference in the way that I came to the story and what kinds of questions I asked myself, right? From scene to scene, it was more like, who is my character? And in this scene, what are they struggling with? Is it belief? Is it plausibility? Is it survival? Is it just, I want to go home? Like, what is it?
Okay, so my next question is, and Nick, you're next.
You've been saying that over and over again. I think we should
hold on.
I don't know.
Hold on. I gotta get in here.
It's that takeover spirit. It's that takeover spirit.
Look, Piper, before this, it was Nick, get some questions for Piper. You got this. And I'm like, great. Well, we just prepare some too, because we know you like to ask very deep questions. And he hit you with the home run right off the bat. I didn't know that was coming.
He's like, I'm congested. I'm not going to talk much.
No, I'm talking all the time. I know. I'm that bitch. Okay, I'm that ass.
Ask your question and then let Nick go. How about that?
All right. This is my last question. You mentioned Laurel K. Hamilton.
Yes.
As you know, being one of the influences. What is it about works like hers and some of the other ones that you've mentioned that you wanted to kind of pick from those influences and then really make it your own?
One of the things that I loved about my introduction to Anita Blake was not just this character who was a little bit irreverent and she was quite, for the time period, an unlikable heroine with like these snarky commentaries and comebacks and stuff. And the fact that, Anita Blake recognized a lot of mythology, right? Like one of my favorite scenes was when she recognized that they were going up against a Quetzalcoatl. And I was like, oh, hey, that was fun. That was interesting to me. But I think one of the things that I liked about the series in general was that it was here kind of an alternate present day reality with supernaturals. And those supernaturals just trying to survive, right? Even vampires. She's a vampire hunter. She literally is an executioner. And she keeps meeting vampires. Like, damn it, she'd feel bad about killing, right? I really liked how even though she is who she is, and she hates, and she's unreserved about telling why she hates, she also has room in her mind and her heart for meeting people, and she recognizes them as people first, that damn, she would really feel bad about killing this person right now. Right? And so I had fun with that idea of like, I'm just a supernatural trying to survive. I'm just trying to blend, or I'm making a choice not to blend, because is that not the diaspora experience? All right. So I loved that without being able to put words to it, because I just didn't have diaspora as a vocabulary word when I first read Anita Blake, and I didn't have the discussion or the discourse. But I had that feeling of, hey, this world is just a bunch of people who maybe don't have a source land or a home that they get to go back to. And they're just here now trying to make a place for themselves, trying to survive. And one of the things I loved about Patty Briggs is, again, not just the main character, but all of the characters were like trying to stay under the radar. But also make lives for themselves. And also low-key ending up having to deal with what everybody does to everybody else. And there's human elements to it, and there's supernatural elements to it, but it still comes down to the human nature of like, dang, things people do to each other. Right? And so I loved that and I honestly liked Mercedes Thompson and the characters better than I liked Anita Blake and the characters, because I had like Richard broke my heart and he can burn.
Yeah, Richard's an asshole.
Right? Like I had problems with that. And then who Anita became over time, having nothing to do with her power ramp up. But the choices she made were ones that I was like, okay, as Anita evolves as a person, I completely respect her, but I have less in common with the choices that she makes anymore. And that's totally okay. I really, really loved the next series that came out with the Meredith Gentry, because I found that I was able to latch onto Meredith and the choices that Meredith made better at that time when I was reading it, in conjunction to who I was. Whereas with Mercy and the Mercy Thompson series or Kate Daniels, I never really latched onto Kate Daniels real well, but I really, really latched onto Andrea from the Kate Daniels series by Alona Andrews. Again, that urban fantasy. But if you notice, Kate Daniels' urban fantasy is very post-apoc, right? Whereas the Mercedes Thompson series by Patricia Briggs is really alt history now, or like alt reality now, not post-apocalyptic. And then you have the Anita Blake series, which, I mean, do we consider that post-apoc?
No.
I don't think so. It's still, it's right here, right now, but it's definitely a major change in population because of the vampire situation. and zombie raising.
It's interesting to hear you talk about all those series, and I didn't realize something when you said it about Laurel, because I've read her since I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And Laurel's half Mexican.
Mm-hmm.
And most people don't realize that. And it's only flavored a little bit in the book. And then it just made me think, oh, this is one of the reasons why I probably like it. Because Laurel herself had no relationship with her Mexican side. So I feel like, you know, a lot of your influences of the things you're gravitating towards and then the questions you're asking now are really interrelated. So it's like taking your influences and also thinking of your life and then remixing it into you, which I think that's fascinating.
Now, to be fair, when it comes to my Thai heritage, I am first generation, arguably, right? Both my parents came from Thailand, grew up in Thailand, came here as adults. And I had the opportunity to go back summers to Thailand. So, but even then, my experience isn't as involved as some of my other friends who, you know, spent a lot more time in Thailand and are much more fluent in the Thai language or had the opportunity to study more intensely Thai traditional dance or other things, right? So that spectrum was there. So I did end up leveraging memories of a friend of mine in college who I only got to hang out with her before, like, we had parted ways because of the age difference and her graduating out. But Carrie was half Thai, half Latina, and she only knew her Latina family. What she told me was she knew her father was Thai, but he died when she was a kid, and his family came from Thailand and took her dad after he passed, and they never heard from the family again. So she knew almost nothing about her Thai heritage. So when we became friends, I took her home a bunch. She talked to my mom. She had a lot of heartfelt conversations with my mom. My dad was a little bit more traditionally like, let me feed you, as his way of caring rather than talking or heart to hearts. That's just the way my dad is. But like, she just kind of soaked that up because she had a loving family, but she was missing some of that background. And so I wanted to try to pull that into some of my characters as well with the Mythwoven series too, because I remember how she felt about that. And I remembered how lucky I was that for my identity, I had a lot of generational knowledge.
Go ahead, Nick.
A lot of my questions, an answer have been given to most of them, but I do want to talk about your book, right? We've got a lot of the background on it, the writing of it, some inspiration, but let's talk about the book.
Okay.
I want your introduction to our two main characters because I think they're very interesting characters and they're very fun. But I want to hear your introduction to these two characters.
All right. So Pirapan is, you know, a 30 something adult Asian American, Thai American, who, you know, at the beginning of our story is, you know, just being a person. And she's in a dance rehearsal for a fundraiser, a charity fundraiser that's coming up. And she's doing this as a favor to her mom. And the main person in charge, the main coordinator, is a childhood friend she just cannot stand. Right. So she's very real because, like, this is the feeling like, oh, the family ties. It's, you could see a little bit in some of the characters in Joy Luck Club if you ever watched that movie. But, you know, that kind of relationship is real where, like, your families are friends and therefore you were childhood friends. But also, like, there's some admiration between the two of you going on that you're struggling with. You know, so Pirapan's dealing with all of this, like, I'm here on stage because I told my mom I would be, but I would avoid this if I could. Right? Kind of just very real, very contemporary, very easygoing. Not easy. This is hard stuff to be dealing with, but it's still very mundane. And then said person gives her a pair of glorious shoes and very uncharacteristically doesn't keep them for herself. And Pirapan puts them on because she can't resist. And they're the red shoes from mythology. And so the rest of the time is Pirapan just trying to figure her way out, trying to figure out how to survive this situation where she's now stuck in a cursed pair of shoes, trying to be practical and just trying to survive one step at a time, literally one step at a time, when they're trying to kill her every time she tries to go down the stairs. right? Or every time she falls asleep, they make her dance, trying to dance her to exhaustion. So she's just trying to figure out how to survive this situation. And Bennett is a vampire who's centuries old, and he fell in love before. It broke him, and he doesn't want to care about humans anymore. He just wants to do his job and just generally be benevolent to the human race in general, because they outnumber all the other supernaturals. So he's like, I don't want to be the villain here. Generally want to be benevolent, but I don't want to care about anybody on an individual level. And he comes into play, and literally he's just thinking, oh, shoes are on somebody. I'll just have to wait till that person dies. And then in the panic, after they die, I'll go grab the shoes. Right? Like, no intention to save anybody. No intention to intercede and try to save somebody once the shoes are on a person, because as far as he's concerned, that's it. That's a death sentence. So there's a certain amount of distance that he has from empathizing with an individual victim. So that's who they are at the start.
I love the dynamic that you have set up there, because there's so much growth from that. One of the things that I noticed in this particular book is you flipped the trope on its head. And I want you to kind of dive into that a little bit.
How do you think I did that?
I mean, I'm going to point this out. So you took the damsel in distress trope and totally spun it around. Where in the beginning, I feel like Bennett's trying to do the whole, I got to save you. But it just doesn't work out that way, because she won't allow it. And she's strong in herself, who she is. She's always like, no, I have a choice in this. You don't get to tell me what to do. I'm doing it because I want to. Kind of talk to me about flipping that trope and your thought process behind that.
I wouldn't say that I tried to flip it, because that would be very extreme, right? Like, I wasn't trying to flip it completely over, but I did want to go with other options. So for Pirapun, she's trapped in the shoes, and she's got a situation here where suddenly in this theater with her stuck in shoes that are that are a problem, and she recognizes they're a problem. She also has no informational sources for how to deal with this problem, except for the supernatural who's actually willing to talk to her and isn't really intending to kill her right now, as far as she can understand. And another supernatural comes into the building, and she can tell, I don't get good vibes off of this guy. And the other shady in the side wings, Bennett is like, he's just here for the shoes. He will probably kill you. I wasn't intending to kill you. But either way, you're going to die with these shoes on unless we get them off. And so she made the best of really bad options. And she's like, okay, take the shoes. And he's like, they're not coming off. Well, I choose you. What's the next step here? Right. And he leaves the building with her, which is great. Let's step out of the being between two things. And we have a supernatural vampire fight. Yay. So it is a choice of come with me if you want to live. And she chooses to live. And he takes her out of that situation. But in the next situation, it's again her choice. He ends up having a vampire fight, and he's managed to stab off the attacker. So she has a chance to get away, but also leaving him in an alley. And he's obviously a supernatural, and he's also the only supernatural she's ever met. And then, okay, I know I'm supposed to go somewhere for safety. I guess I can take him with me as long as there's a scooter. Like, there are options again. So she chooses options to save him. And then again, there's also that fairness of he saved me. He got me out of a bad situation, and now he's dying. And I think I can help here without dying myself. So I'm going to help. And so she does, again, return the favor. And it goes back and forth through the book a little bit of who's helping who or who's offering information to who. When we have the climax, I did twist it a little bit. And my intent there was that she's still problem solving for herself. She's not relying on someone to come save her. Any of her new friends might not be able to find her in time. So she's doing the best she can to buy herself time and also find a way out herself. And ultimately, what I wanted for her was that she be able to find her way out. And I do this in the True Hero series too. Several of the heroines solve the immediate danger problem. And then when the hero or the heroine also shows up, they get them the rest of the way out. So the idea here of not waiting for fate to come rescue you, fate only takes you so far. But you can be poised to be ready for the chance to survive, or the chance to be happy, or the chance to get what you want. And that's what I wanted for my characters, is like, they're going to keep trying to be in a position where if help comes, they can take that helping hand.
No, I love it. It's one of the things that stuck out to me was, I need to choose my words carefully. Some other writers would have chosen the damsel in distress and made Bennett the hero, the rescuer the entire time. We've seen that plenty, but I really like your choice with Parapan and like how you presented that. Like you said, another option on that one. And I don't know why everything you're saying, I'm like, man, she's a survivor. Like, she knows how to get through it. Is there anything from your experiences or inspirations for that type of character?
I mean, I'm just a diaspora trying to survive, right? Like, no, there's a whole lot of different identities, but all right. So this is a bad B movie, but still a lot of fun. Was Predators, or was it Predator? And there was a quote from one of the main characters in there. That was a very military style quote. That was something along the lines of, the moment I was born, I dropped into enemy territory and I just started to crawl my way towards death. Right. And that was kind of badass, right? I was thinking, I love that line out of this really B movie that I somehow really enjoy watching and playing in the background for odd reasons, because there's alien dogs in there that play fetch with grenades. So I was just like, okay, I kind of like that concept of we're all born, and from the minute we breathe, we're just trying to survive for the time that we have here. So I just think every person, the human experience, is about trying to survive. Now, the other thing from my experiences is, especially with mixed martial arts, I had a trainer who was like, okay, especially because I hate grappling. I hate grappling and I hate Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but I took both. And part of the reason why was because at the mixed martial arts studio that I was at, we tried to put practical application to the mixed martial arts we were learning. I was studying Junfan Jeet Kune Do. I was studying Muay Thai. I was studying Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I was also studying Kali, which is weapons. And we would apply it to, hey, how can you apply this to self-defense? And one of the things they told me is like, you're a great stand-up striker. You're great. You've got heavy hands. You've got really quick feet. They're like, your kicks are devastating, but you are the stature you are. You are the identity you are. And the first thing an attacker is going to try to do is grapple with you and take you down to the ground for things. So we need to teach you grappling. And one of the things that they taught me was to take my time and think while I was down there in practice, so that my body would remember what my choices were when I was too panicked in a situation to deal. So we would talk and we'd go through very slowly what the options were for my body when I was pinned down in certain ways, so that I could look for those openings and look for those moments and breathe with those moments to get my way, to look for openings to get away, to get myself out of those situations. And I think that they've covered that in other movies and stuff like that. So you may find those kinds of concepts in other movies with mixed martial arts and stuff, but there's always an option, particularly when it's a movie that includes like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or grappling, is like, you're constantly like tiny shifting. If you've ever watched a fight that's mostly grappling, it seems kind of boring because they're just kind of like down there on the ground. But what you don't realize is there's micro movements going on as each of them is trying to look for a moment to do a thing and get the leverage and get out of the hold or get this or do that. Right. So I think that part of the experience also is something that I apply to most problem solving when it comes to situations. It's just constantly trying to find the best options you have ahead of you before the variables change.
Yeah. One comment, Marshall, then I'll pass it to you here. I find that all interesting because military background, that's how we're trained, right? like figure it out before it even happens, muscle memory training like that way. So I find what you're saying is very interesting, and I love that concept. I'm going to toss it to Marshall, though, for I think our last question here, or second to last question, because we always have our famous outro question here. But Marshall?
Yeah, and the last question, Piper, shouldn't be a surprise, but this is not the last question, the second to last. But you mentioned earlier, I'm excited to see where this series goes. You mentioned that future books will not have, Punch and Bennett as the main characters, maybe. But if I'm curious, since our listeners may or may not have read the book yet, and we've done a pretty good job of not spoiling too much, what can people expect if they pick this up for the rest of the series?
They can expect more objects of myth and magic from around the world. I'll even give a hint that I took a trip to Egypt in 2021. And so a lot of what I learned there will be featured in the objects that are featured in book 2. So that's a nice hint for you. And I also have a love for folklore and mythology from around the world. So you're going to encounter more objects of myth and magic from around the world that become, the catalyst for the events in each of the books. And if you have read Wings Once Cursed and Bound, you could probably make an educated guess as to who is involved in the central relationship as the main characters of book 2.
Are we doing the last question?
Are you doing the last question?
Yeah.
Are you doing another?
Brent and LP haven't gotten a chance to get a word in edgewise. You're going to take the last question.
Go ahead, Brent. I don't have to go.
I asked a hard question. It took me a long time to formulate it.
I appreciate your question. Brent's like, no, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. We'll just keep it.
I mean, Brent knows what the last question is. I mean,
I know the last question.
If he wanted to get his voice in, he could do it. But Will, you're up. Go ahead, buddy. You got this.
Right? Oh, me? Okay. Shut up, guys. Piper.
Will.
Tell us, what just keeps you writing? What keeps you writing?
Oh, goodness gracious. I keep finding stories everywhere I go, everywhere I turn. I'm like, I see a story. I smell a story. I taste a story. I have a story. So I keep writing them. And honest to goodness, ideas are never the problem. And in fact, one of the processes that I established early on with my agent is that I would send her emails with my story ideas so that she could keep a file, because then it'd be out of my head and I wouldn't be distracted like a squirrel by the shiny thing when I was on contract to write a book. And at any given time, I'm generally writing like 3 different series. So she keeps the ideas that I'm not currently working on. And then when I say I'm ready for a new series, what do we think? She will either grab what is most marketable of my fun ideas. Like she'll give me a list of my 5 ideas that I have given to her safekeeping out of the 20 that she's got. And she goes, okay, of these 5, which are the ones that you are most excited about? And then we'll talk about that. And she will also we'll try to get a Venn diagram of the ideas that I have that I'm the most excited about. And also she thinks are the most marketable at the moment, right? Because every story is going to be marketable eventually, just timing, right? So that's what we do for a pitch. And when we decide what I'm going to write next. But sometimes I just preempt her because I saw a story and I go and I write it instead. And I'm like, just keep those on hold forever. I'll get there sometime. So that's why I just keep writing, because I just keep getting ideas.
Awesome. Well,
I love that.
Look, I can't thank you enough for appearing on the show. We had a great series a few episodes back, and we love having you here. And we're going to do it again, obviously. And we're very excited about the launch of your book. And thanks for coming and talking to us about it. Is there anything else that you'd like to say in regards to that?
I mean, I don't know. I love talking to all of you. And I'm so glad that you've been so generous to give so much time to this series and this book in particular for discussions in the episodes that we've had recently. So thank you for having me.
And we'll do it again for
Yeah,
sure.
thanks for coming along.
And this has been Just Keep Writing, a podcast for writers, by writers, to keep you writing. You can find us at justkeepwriting.org. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Feel free to reach out to any of us on our social medias, and please jump in our Just Keep Writing Discord channel. Links to all of that is in the show notes. Lastly, please support our show by going to patreon.com/justkeepwriting. We offer daily writing prompts, early access to podcast episodes, and much more. Thanks for listening, and just keep writing.